welcome you to the release of the preliminary statements of the International Electoral Observation Missions to the 2019 National Assembly elections of the Republic of Mauritius. My name is Gabriel Malebang from the SADC Secretariat, and I'll be the Master of Ceremonies for this session. We will begin with the release of the preliminary statement of the Southern African Development Community, the SADC, which will be delivered by the Honorable Lieutenant General retired Dr. Sibusiso Moyo, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Trade of the Republic of Zimbabwe, and the head of the SADC Electoral Observation Mission to Mauritius. And that statement will be followed by the release of the African Union Electoral Observation Mission preliminary statement, which will be done by Dr. Specioza Wandira Kazibwe, the former Vice President of the Republic of Uganda and the Chairperson of the African Union Panel of the Wise and the head of the African Union Electoral Observation Mission to the Republic of Mauritius. After the African Union statement, we will receive the release of the SADC Electoral Commission's Forum of SADC Countries Election Observation Mission preliminary statement by Mr. Glenn Mashinini, the head of the Electoral Commission's Forum of SADC Countries Election Observation Mission to the Republic of Mauritius. Then at the end, we will receive the release of the preliminary statement of the International Organization of La Francophonie Electoral Observation Mission, which will be presented by His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Ojad, the former Minister of Justice of the Republic of Morocco, the Kingdom of Morocco, and head of the La Francophonie Election Observation Mission to Mauritius.
On behalf of the Southern African Development Community, and as mandated by His Excellency Dr. Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and the Chairperson of the SADC organ on politics, defense, and security cooperation. It is indeed my honor to welcome you to this important event of the release of the preliminary statement of the SADC Electoral Observation Mission, SIOM, on the conduct of the 7th of November 2019 National Assembly elections in the Republic of Mauritius. The mission observes the national elections in accordance with the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections as amended in 2015 and also in line with the laws of Mauritius. The mission had a total composition of 45 personnel who were deployed to 20 of the 21 constituencies of the country, which account for 97% of the total population of registered voters. On election day, the mission covered a total of 124 polling stations, or 37% of the total. As part of its mandate, the mission engaged key stakeholders in Mauritius, which include government departments, political parties, civil society, faith-based organizations, academia, the media, the Electoral Supervisory Commission, the Office of the Electoral Commission, and the judiciary. This preliminary report covers the mission's observation of the pre-election process, voting day, and, of course, counting. The final report will include our observations of the post-election processes, which include the results management and announcement processes. First, the summary of key findings. The SADC Election Observation Mission observed the following aspects of best practice. First, the political and security environment. The mission observes political activities, particularly campaign rallies, public meetings, and door-to-door canvassing that were conducted in a very peaceful atmosphere. The Mauritius Police Force complemented this peaceful community spirit by providing the necessary security for a conducive electoral environment. In terms of the management of the electoral process itself, the elections were overseen by the Electoral Supervisory Commission, whose appointment process involves the President in consultation with the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, and other political party leaders in Parliament. In addition, the operational and technical aspects of the elections are managed by the Office of the Electoral Commission, who is appointed by the Judicial Service Commission. The mission also observed the following regarding the Electoral Supervisory Commission and the Office of the Electoral Commission. First, there is confidence and trust amongst stakeholders in the manner in which the previous and current elections have been organized and conducted. Second, voter registration and education were well conducted. Through the annual voter registration exercises, which also included the use of mobile registration units and door-to-door canvassing, the number of registered voters increased to almost 80% of the total eligible voters, from 936,975 in 2014 to 941,719 in 2019. Third, incorporation of the use of translate ballot boxes for voting purposes at polling stations was clearly visible. Fourthly, the efficient use of information communication technologies, particularly in the capturing, management, and dissemination of electoral data and information. The data management and accessibility add significantly to the transparency of the electoral process and agenda, confidence in the management of the elections for the enhancement of democracy in this country. Fifthly, despite the short notice given for the elections and facing a record of 817 candidates for the National Assembly elections, ballot papers were printed, verified, delivered on time. Necessary arrangements were made to accommodate the officials and party agents in all the 332 polling stations. And sixthly, a significant proportion, which was 45.45% of the candidates, were young people aged between 18 and 40 years old, thus reflecting the investment that the country is making in its future leadership. In as far as observations on election day, on election day, the mission observed activities at 124 polling stations across the country, and these constituted 37% of the total, which is a relatively high proportion by international standards. At these 124 polling stations, the mission observed the following. Firstly, the atmosphere was orderly, calm, and peaceful at all polling stations, and uniformed police were discreetly visible and professional at all the polling stations. Secondly, all polling stations opened on time and opening procedures were duly followed. Thirdly, no major instances of concern were observed. Fourthly, the voters' roll was displayed in all the polling stations. And fifthly, of the 124 polling stations, no campaign materials were visible within the 200-meter radius except at one polling station, and the police intervened accordingly. Sixth, all polling stations were accessible to all voters, including people with disabilities, and these voters were given priority except one polling station. Seventh, voter education materials, such as posters, were posted outside all polling stations except for two. Generally, there were between 8 to 9 strips, that means voting rooms, arranged in an alphabetical order at each polling station. Voting took on average about 1 to 3 minutes for each voter. And 8, all essential election materials in the correct quantities were available at 100% of the polling stations at the opening of the polls and throughout the rest of the voting day. 9, women formed 70% of presiding officers and 73% of political party agents. At some polling stations, there were large numbers of party candidates agents, with one of the largest polling stations having 80 registered there. And 10, only one polling station did not close on time. First, that is at 1800 hours, as there were still voters in the queue. And voting went on until 1830 hours, and all such voters were allowed to vote. 11. At 30 out of the 124 polling stations, some voters were turned away mainly because they were at the wrong polling station or were not on the voters' roll. The large majority of those turned away were at the wrong polling station and were directed to the correct polling stations. For a sample of 25 of the 124 polling stations that the mission observed, 231 voters were turned away or redirected. 12. All closing procedures were followed at all the polling stations. And 13th, lastly, polling officials were courteous and professional in their conduct, and all polling stations had appropriate signage to direct voters to the correct voting strip. Now, which are the areas which we think require improvement? Our mission also observed the following areas of the electoral process and systems that may require improvement. First, the declaration of community and best user system. The most contentious aspect of the electoral system is the constitutional requirement for candidates to declare which community they belong to as a condition for their candidature to be accepted as valid in order to contest for the 62 directly elected seats in Parliament. The Constitution recognizes 4 communities, namely Hindu, Muslim, Sino-Mauritian, or general population. Although the above requirement was inserted at independence to ensure that no community was underrepresented in Parliament, some sections of the community now consider it a divisive ethnic requirement. In this regard, some candidates failed to comply with this obligatory requirement and were therefore not permitted to stand as candidates. In addition, the Constitution makes provision for 8 seats that are to be filled by those unsuccessful candidates who would have attained a considerable amount of votes, the best losers. The mission acknowledges the positive spirit behind this innovation and inclusive practice. However, best user system is directly linked to the requirement for the declaration of community, and the 8 additional seats are allocated based on calculations derived from the population census of 1972, which 47 years later does not take into account the demographical changes in the country. The mission notes that requirement for declaration of community and the use of the 1972 census with respect to the best user system had been subjected to intensive debate, litigation in Mauritius, as well as to scrutiny by the United Nations Human Rights Committee. Given the background of this matter, the mission is cognizant of the findings of the full bench of the Supreme Court of Mauritius, which in 2005, while it's noting that the matter can only be resolved by Parliament, cited the following problems inherent in the best user system. Firstly, consecration of communal consideration in constitutional terms. And secondly, the difficulty of determining the way of life of the Hindu, Muslim, and Sino Mauritian communities. And thirdly, the fair and adequate representation of communities, which is unrealistically based on the 1972 official census. In terms of the delimitation of constituencies, the mission notes that the voter population in constituencies should be more or less similar in order to guarantee the equality of each vote. This principle is recognized in the Constitution of Mauritius with respect to the delimitation of constituencies, which is required to be carried out every 10 years. The mission notes the following areas of concern with respect to the delimitation of constituencies. Firstly, in terms of the Constitution, Parliament can approve or reject the reports of the Electoral Boundaries Commission. The SADC Electoral Observation Mission was informed that such reports were actually rejected, and therefore previous recommendations on the delimitation of constituencies in view of changing demographic patterns had not been implemented. And secondly, consequently, there are wide variations in registered voter populations between and amongst the 21 constituencies of the country. The current average constituent size is about 44,843 voters. But just as an example, constituency number 3, Port Louis Maritime and Port Louis East, has 21,943 voters, while its constituency number 14, Savannah and Black River, has 63,500 voters, a difference of 300%. Dissolution of Parliament. The President of the Republic of Mauritius may dissolve Parliament at any time and thus triggering a general election. Although the President acts on the advice of the Prime Minister in this respect, the power to dissolve Parliament at any time creates uncertainty in the life cycle of this important institution of the country's democracy. In addition, this may negatively impact the level of preparedness of all stakeholders for the elections. Floor crossing. The mission observed that members of the National Assembly may switch identities in the life cycle of Parliament, and that currently this practice is unregulated, and this has implications on the stability of both Parliament and the government. Electoral management bodies. Though Section 41 of the Constitution provides for the functions of the Electoral Supervisory Commission, and the Office of the Electoral Commissioner, respectively. The mission noted that the roles of the two institutions need further clarity in order to distinguish their individual responsibilities. Representation of women. On average, and between 1976 and 2014, Parliament has had only 5, which is 8%, elected female members out of the total 62 directly elected members. The proportion of elected female members of the National Assembly rose slowly to a high of 16% in 2010, before dropping to 13% in the 2014 elections. Female candidates for the 2019 elections account for only 26% of the total. The mission notes that the representation of women in Parliament remains low, given their socio-economic significance and the fact that they account for more than 50% of the voters in the country. Counting of votes. The mission observed that once voting is closed, procedures are completed for ballot boxes to be transported to counting centers, and for the counting to be conducted on the following day. Regulation of campaign funding. The mission noted that whilst there is a limitation on the amount of money spent by candidates for campaign purposes, the limitations do not extend to political parties. There is no regulation of foreign financial flows into the country's elections, particularly with respect to the funding of political parties. The injection of foreign money that may occur has the potential to cause undue influence in the domestic politics of the country. Overall reform efforts. In concluding on the areas of the electoral system that require improvement, it will be remiss not to recognize the efforts that have been made to address some of these issues. In this respect, the mission appreciates the Constitutional Amendment Bill, which proposed the following. First, the wider representation of parties in the National Assembly by increasing the directly elected seats to 63, while adding 12 proportional representation seats and a maximum of 10 additional seats to increase the total seats from 70 to 85. Secondly, doing away with the requirement for the mandatory declaration as to which community a candidate belongs to. And thirdly, ending the use of the 1972 census as the basis for allocating additional seats by adopting a new, less complicated mechanism. Fourthly, seeking better gender representation in the National Assembly by requiring every party or alliance to present not more than 2/3 of constituent candidates of the same sex, and requiring every peer list submitted by a party or party alliance to comprise not more than 2/3 of persons of the same sex. And finally, the bill was talking about the anti-defection measures which were to enhance stability. Whilst the mission acknowledges these progressive proposals made by the government of Mauritius, regrettably, the constitutional amendments failed to garner the required support in Parliament and were shelved indefinitely as a result. What do we recommend as the standard election observation mission? In light of the mission's observations and considering the issues highlighted by various stakeholders, The SADC Electoral Observation Mission recommends the following for the improvement of the electoral process in the Republic of Mauritius. Firstly, overall constitutional and electoral reforms. The government and the people of Mauritius are urged to engage in an all-inclusive consultation process to enhance their democracy by focusing on, amongst others, the possibility even of a referendum to implement comprehensive constitutional and electoral law reforms here. In this regard, the proposals in the Constitution Amendment Bill may be a practical starting point. In addition, consideration may be given to the following. Firstly, reviewing the circumstances under which Parliament can be dissolved to enhance certainty, and making further provisions to clarify the roles of the Electoral Supervisory Commission and the Office of the Electoral Commissioner. Second, delimitation of constituencies. The government and relevant stakeholders are encouraged to put in place measures to ensure that the recommendations of the Electoral Boundaries Commission are implemented or adopted by Parliament. And secondly, to ensure that the voter population variations amongst all the 21 constituencies are within the permissible population quota as defined by Section 39, subsection 5 of the Constitution. Thirdly, counting of votes. Consideration should be given to amending the Representation of the People Act to make provision for ballots to be counted immediately after the closure of the polls, and the results to be posted outside the polling stations. Regulations of political party funding. The government and all stakeholders are urged to consult on possible regulation of political party financing. Voters who were turned away. In view of the number of voters who were turned away or redirected to other polling stations, the Electoral Supervisory Commission, the Office of the Electoral Commissioner, and other stakeholders are urged to redouble their efforts to ensure that voters are adequately sensitized on the need to respect the voters' register in advance of each election. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the SADC Electoral Observation Mission observed that the pre-election and voting phases of the 2019 National Assembly elections were professionally organized, conducted in an orderly, peaceful, and free atmosphere, which enabled the voters to express their democratic will, and those who sought office also had the privilege to campaign freely. The mission, however, therefore urges the people of Mauritius to maintain their democratic spirit until the conclusion of the election cycle, which is the post-election period. And in accordance with the SADC principles and guidance governing democratic elections as amended in 2015, our final report will be issued within 30 days of this preliminary report and statement. Thank you very much. Muito obrigado. Merci beaucoup. Asante sana.
Democratic elections in Africa. His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, deployed an election observation mission to the 7th November 29 parliamentary elections in the Republic of Mauritius. The African Union Election Observation Mission arrived in the Republic of Mauritius on the 31st of October 2019 and will remain in the country until the 12th of November 2019. The African Union Election Observation Mission is led by myself, Dr. Speciosa Wandira Kazibwe, former Vice President of the Republic of Uganda and member of the AU Panel of the Wise and co-chairperson of the African Women Mediators Network, known as FemWise Africa. The mission comprises ambassadors drawn from the Permanent Representatives Committee of the African Union, members of the Pan-African Parliament, election administrators of the African Union, members of the Pan-African Parliament, PAP, civil society, media, and electoral experts. The deployment of this mission to Mauritius demonstrates the African Union's commitment to supporting peaceful, democratic, and credible electoral processes in its member states by providing an objective assessment of the process. This is in line with aspiration number 3 of Agenda 2063, which aims at ensuring good governance, democracy, and respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law on the continent. The conduct of peaceful, democratic, and credible elections is widely recognized as being critical to the achievement of Agenda 2063 and the African Union's vision of an integrated, peaceful, and prosperous African continent. The methodology we use. Relevant AU instruments such as the 2007 African Union Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, the 2002 OAU/AU Declaration on Principles Governing Democratic Elections in Africa, and the 2002 African Union Guidelines for Election Observation and Monitoring Missions, as well as Mauritius's legal framework and international commitment for democratic elections have guided the mission's activities. To have a better understanding of the political dynamic and as part of its assessment of the elections, the mission met various stakeholders, including the acting president, His Excellency Paramasipum Pillai, the Electoral Commissioner, Mr. Abdul Rahman, the Minister of Justice, Human Rights and Institutional Reforms, Honorable Manish Govind, heads of international election observation missions, and the academia. On election day, our mission deployed 15 teams of 2 observers each, which visited 207 voting rooms in 21 constituencies. The observers were equipped with tactile tablets and transmitted data to a coordinating team based at our mission secretariat. This statement presents the mission's preliminary findings and observations covering pre-voting up to and including the closing and counting procedures yesterday, that is the 8th of November 2019. A final comprehensive report will be released upon the conclusion of the electoral process and will be shared with relevant stakeholders of the Republic of Mauritius. Pre-election findings. Political context. The mission noted that elections were conducted under peaceful and calm conditions. However, stakeholders that the mission interacted with raised some concerns related to the timing of elections. In other words, the elections have taken place concurrently with national examinations. Role of the media. The media has played a great role in covering the elections. However, the mission noted some concerns by local stakeholders with the inequitable coverage of all political parties by the state media. Our election day findings. Mauritians went to the polls on the 7th of November 2019 in a calm and peaceful atmosphere. Our mission visited 207 polling stations, 43% of which were located in rural areas and 57% in urban areas. The mission made the following observations on polling day. Number 1, location and accessibility of polling stations. Most polling stations were located in schools that were easily accessed by the voters. These were laid out in a manner that allowed for easy flow of voters. The mission noted and commends the special voting rooms dedicated to people living with disabilities called special needs voting rooms, which were located in all polling stations visited. Assistance was provided to these people according to the voting procedures. The mission also noted that priority was not necessarily given to the elderly and pregnant women. Polling environment. In all polling stations observed by our mission, the environment was calm and peaceful. Queues were observed in 53% of the observed voting rooms. Observers also noted campaign activities and materials within the prescribed limit in 8% of the polling stations observed. Opening procedures. The mission noted that candidates, political parties, and polling agents were given access to the polling stations before the opening to perform their duties without interference or restrictions. Ballot papers were noted to be empty. Ballot boxes were noted to be empty and properly sealed before the resumption of the vote. Parties, polling agents, and observers. Political parties, candidates, and international observers were present at polling stations visited by the mission. Election materials. Our mission noted that election materials were available in sufficient quantities throughout the day. Election officials and polling agents had copies of the electoral list in voting rooms observed to help confirm voters' identity. Election personnel. The mission noted the presence of the full complement of voting room staff in stations observed. The AU mission observers also noted that polling staff performed their tasks professionally and consistently maintained interaction with election stakeholders such as polling parties, polling officers, and international observers. On the voting process, the understanding of the voting procedures and the peaceful atmosphere in polling stations contributed to a smooth voting process. The process was not interrupted nor disturbed at any time in voting rooms observed. All polling stations visited remained open until the official closing time. The African Union Observer Mission noted that all voting rooms observed the secrecy, in all the voting rooms observed, the secrecy of the vote was guaranteed. Some voters were turned away in 4% of the polling rooms visited due to voter identification issues. The mission also noted that some citizens were disenfranchised because they could not find their names on the voters' roll. The mission noted that in 91% of the voting rooms visited, no campaign activities or materials were observed. On the participation of women. The mission regrettably notes the low number of female candidates, 18.52%, compared to that of male candidates, 81.48%. However, the mission commends the high level of participation of women as election officials and party agents. Women were well represented in the voting rooms visited as polling staff. They constituted 64% of the polling staff, and as representatives of parties candidates. In the stations we visited, 46% of the polling agents belonging to parties or candidates were female. On security, the mission noted the professionalism and the discretion of the security personnel in the polling stations where they observed the poll. On closing of the poll, we observed that all the polling stations we observed as AU observers closed at the legal closing time of 18 hours for Mauritius and 17 hours for Rodriguez. The African Union Observer Mission noted the peaceful and calm atmosphere at the time of closing. There were no queues observed at closing, and security personnel were professional and discreet. Observers and polling agents were able to observe closing procedures without interference. The counting procedures. On the 8th of November, the African Union Election Observer Mission teams observed the counting from various counting centers. Although the counting procedure was delayed, having been conducted on the day after election day, our mission noted that counting centers were professionally manned by security personnel. The African Union Election Observer Mission also noted that the counting process did not allow political party agents to raise their concerns regarding the procedure as per international best practice. In other words, they were not able to physically check the seals and counter-check the counting of the ballot papers. Our recommendations. These are to the government. We urge the government to reconsider the political party and candidate finance law in order to ensure a level playing field. We also urge the government to consider enacting a law to enforce affirmative action to ensure meaningful participation of women as candidates in the electoral process. We also urge the government to consider enforcing a law on the full participation of civil society in the electoral process through civic education and election observation. Recommendation to the electoral authorities. The Electoral Commission should consider adhering to international procedures of counting the ballots on the same day of the election and posting the results outside the polling stations. We also recommend that the Electoral Commission ensures that the ballot booths are positioned in a manner that ensures secrecy of the vote. The Electoral Commission is also urged to ensure usage of indelible ink to prevent the likely incidence of people voting more than once by, for example, using multiple identity cards. To the political parties, we recommend that political parties ensure the training of their party agents in voting procedures to enable them to effectively monitor the elections. We also urge political parties to ensure that they avoid having party agents wearing party regalia and symbols inside the voting rooms or in the proximity of polling stations like we found in 1 or 2 polling areas. To the civil society organizations of Mauritius, we urge you to play a greater role in the consolidation of democracy in the Republic of Mauritius. In conclusion, the African Union Election Observer Mission applauds the people of Mauritius for their commitment to upholding democracy as demonstrated in the peaceful conduct of the campaign and the polls. Based on our findings, and despite some challenges encountered on election and counting days, the African Union Election Observer Mission concludes that the 7th November 2019 legislative elections were peacefully and professionally conducted. The African Union Election Observer Mission calls on political parties, candidates and the people of Mauritius to preserve peace in the country and resort to legal means in case of any disputes arising from the elections. Once again, the African Union Election Observer Mission congratulates the people of Mauritius for the peaceful legislative election.
Proceed with the report that I'm here to present on behalf of the Electoral Commission's Forum of the SADC region. And this observer mission comprises of electoral management bodies within the SADC member states. And the mandate of the ECF SADC is to strengthen cooperation amongst the electoral commissions of the region and to promote conditions conducive to credible and transparent elections in the region. And the cooperation includes supporting as practitioners and as peers of each other as members of the EMBs. The Electoral Commission's Forum of SADC received an invitation from the Office of the Electoral Commission of Mauritius, which was dated the 15th of October 2019, to observe the National Assembly elections scheduled for the 7th of November 2019. And in line with its mandate of strengthening that cooperation amongst the EMBs in the region, the ECF deployed an observer mission to these elections. Notwithstanding that this is one of the busiest periods in the region where we are holding a number, or we've gone through such a large number of elections, with, I think, one more to go in Namibia. The ECF, with the limited resources, did manage to send a peer group comprised of 8 members, 5 drawn from 5 electoral commissions, namely the Commission of Botswana, Malawi, South Africa, Mozambique, and Seychelles. And the mission's period was from the 2nd to the 10th of November 2019. One had the honor to lead that mission as the chair of the leader of the mission, and was deputized by the Commissioner Bastiene from the Seychelles. And the deployment period of the teams was from the 6th to the 8th of November 2019. This deployment considered a random sampling of the polling stations and combined both the rural and the urban areas, and provided us with a reasonable sample of the areas to be observed. And the 3 teams we had covered 15 constituencies out of the 21 constituencies of the Republic of Mauritius. The mission also undertook a pre-election assessment which took place on the 23rd to the 25th of October, and that pre-assessment enabled the mission to establish the state of preparedness of the Electoral Commission of Mauritius. In addition, engagements were undertaken with the select stakeholders and polling day observation, and further enabling the mission to assess the overall readiness and prevailing conditions to the elections in Mauritius. A preliminary statement of the ECF SADC will be available to this audience and shall have full details of what we covered. And for the purposes of this audience, one is just going to provide a summary of the findings. And this would cover the preliminary findings on the pre-election phase, the election phase, which is the polling day, and we also would then identify and provide what lessons were learned. And specifically, this enables us as the practitioners, one, to provide the member body with a set of best practice notes from which we all are learning and for them to reinforce, but also it extends to other members to say what then are the best practices that we can emulate throughout the region as we continue to advance the SADC Now, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to take you through what to then with the actions or activities undertaken in each of the phases that I have just outlined. The pre-election assessment mission. The ECF undertook a visit to Mauritius on the 23rd to 25th of October, and the purpose of the visit was to assess the preparedness. Engagement with the Electoral Commission of Mauritius. The mission interacted with the Electoral Commission of Mauritius to gather information related to the 2019 National Assembly elections and assess the state of readiness. And the Commission confirmed its readiness to conduct these elections, highlighting some challenges they faced in the build-up to the elections, which included, among others, the short election calendar notice. The ECM only had 30 days to arrange and conduct these elections, which by any standard is considered one of the shortest times to organize an election. The late withdrawal of returning officers due to the clash with some with the exams, some of the experienced returning officers had to be replaced because they were no longer available for the commission, and new electoral staff to be identified, trained, and deployed. Non-availability of some of the schools as voting venues. Again, due to the clash with the exams and the election date, some of the schools were no longer available as polling stations because they were earmarked as examination for the examination. Consultation with stakeholders. The mission held a number of seminars with stakeholders representing different sectors of the society. These included, but not limited to, the media fraternity, the academia, and other non-state actors, which then accorded the mission an opportunity to understand the conditions in which these elections were to take place. And these were some of the concerns that arose and were identified in those engagements. Election coverage by the Mauritian Broadcasting Corporation, which is the public broadcaster. A very clear indication and of concern was raised by the stakeholders about the coverage by NBC of all political parties and the equitable allocation of time. The political party funding, there were also concerns regarding the political party funding, which was identified as having increasingly become unregulated, and the regulatory policies riddled with loopholes, enabling partial transparency and verification of expenditure by the political players. Gender issues, it was also noticeable in engagement that there is a low representation of women as candidates contesting these elections. And this highlighted a serious concern as it had an impact in how women are then empowered in this society. Inappropriate use of social media. Further, we were made aware of the concerns and observed the concerns regarding the inappropriate use of social media in disinformation and misrepresentation of candidates and political party representatives without room for recourse. On the pre-election observation by the mission, there was generally a calm political mood in the country and a conducive environment existed to hold elections. It was a highly contested election and increased interest by the citizens and political parties. The contesting political parties and candidates displayed a good and an exemplary culture of political tolerance, as there were no incidences cited that were counter to a conducive environment to hold the elections. The participation of women as the candidates, even pre-election observation, remain very low in our observation. The Electoral Commission optimally utilized the social media to update and inform the voters. Almost on a continuous basis, they were streaming information as the Commission. We further observed that there was a high level of confidence and trust by all stakeholders in the Electoral Commission, including the political party representatives and candidates that we managed to engage in some of the protestation. We also noted that there's lack of clarity in the delineation of roles between the Electoral Commission and the Supervisory Commission. We further noted that there's a high level, or there was non-participation of civil society organizations in electoral matters. And there was a prevalence of misinformation that was noted as indicated earlier on social media. And there was a concern that the proxy system may actually infringe on the secrecy of balloting, and that it also excludes other categories of possible eligible voters, such as the elderly, the sick, and so on. On consultative meetings and briefings that held, the mission attended a number of consultative meetings, including heads of international observation missions organized by the SADC Observer Mission and the African Union Election Observer Mission on the 6th and the 8th of November, respectively. And these meetings facilitated sharing of observation on pre-polling, polling, and post-polling phases. And the mission also attended some media briefings at the office with the Electoral Commission. The next phase is the election phase. During the visit to the polling stations, the mission made the following observations. Polling stations opened on time and opening procedures were followed. There was adequate election material at the visited polling stations. Party agents were present in all polling stations visited. However, they did not necessarily represent all political parties and independent candidates contesting the elections. Party agents were in the main conversant with their roles. Where long queues were observed, they were effectively well managed, and this could be attributed to the following arrangements: limiting 500 electors per voting room, placing a copy of the electors list outside the voting station, having directing officials at the entrance of the voting station, providing a number of polling booths in each voting room, adequate voter education, and well-trained polling staff who meticulously executed their roles. Smaller classrooms were limited in space, and this led to polling booths being positioned in a manner, by being close to each other, in a manner that had the potential to compromise the secrecy of the vote. Voters with special needs were well catered for, as well as assisted through the special needs rooms provided. The electors list were managed effectively in most polling stations visited, and some electors' names did not appear either due to going to a wrong polling station or not having registered the votes, or their names not being known what happened to them. And in most of those cases, those people were duly assisted to the office of inquiry that was in place. At the most polling stations visited, women formed a substantial part of the staff. Youth were mostly visible as party agent and electoral staff in some polling stations visited. Security personnel were visibly present, courteous, professional, and effectively maintained law and order. Only international observers were present at most polling stations visited, and no domestic observers were seen, which raised concern about the local empowerment. No campaigns were observed within the 200-meter polling station radius as per applicable regulations. Where alternative polling stations were utilized due to non-availability of school facilities during exam period, sufficient signage was provided and personnel were deployed to redirect the electors. In polling stations visited, it was observed that the voting took place in that calm and orderly manner. And regarding the closing counting of results, the mission observed that the polling stations visited closed according to the laid down procedure. The closing procedure was done in a transparent manner in the presence of party agents and the observers. The transportation of ballot boxes to counting centers was under adequate security. However, it was noted that some polling stations were converted into counting centers. Therefore, the ballots were stored in those centers. Ballot boxes were stored overnight under a special mobile unit in the presence of party agents. The counting centers were sealed, secured, including doors and windows. The counting then started on time at 8 o'clock after the polling day. The seals were broken in the presence of candidates, party agents, and observers. Clear counting guidelines were followed in the presence of all stakeholders, inclusive of police, candidates, observers, and party agents. Upon completion of counting, the results were verified and announced by the returning officers. Most important part for us is what were the lessons learned. In the lessons learned, the following, the lessons were drawn from the National Assembly elections of the Republic of Mauritius, and these stand out as the best practices to be emulated in the SADC region. First is that the legislative provisions that mandate employers to release their employees for the voting purposes. The just-in-time compilation, analysis, and transmission of voting statistics on the election day. The optimal utilization of technology by the Electoral Commission, in particular social media, for dissemination of electoral information and voter education. The high level of transparency, accessibility, and user-friendliness demonstrated by the Electoral Commission. Sole financing of electoral processes by the government of Mauritius, which also ensures optimum autonomy and the independence of the Electoral Commission of Mauritius. The detailed documentation of decision activities, processes during the electoral cycle, contributing to the institutional memory to the Electoral Commission. The administration of the screening process was also an excellent and distinctly demonstrated one of the best practices in the SADC region. This also the provision of the inquiry and the information rooms, which is the help desk at the polling station to address issues of voter registration, also was one of the exemplary practices. And as indicated earlier, the concept of streams was effectively administered with adequate support staff, including presiding officers per voting room and segmented voters' roll, as well as the directing clerk. Lastly, the concept of streams was effectively administered with adequate support staff. And as such, we noted that these were the key practitioner best examples that were noted. Recommendations. The ECF SADC mission makes the following recommendations for consideration. Firstly, to develop and introduce a political party funding framework to regulate funding of political parties and candidates. Secondly, to consider introducing some legislative framework to promote participation of women in electoral matters, including contesting candidates. Thirdly, consideration for an independent review of the media regulatory framework to address the regulatory and equitable coverage shortcomings, including adoption of an enforceable media code of conduct. Fourth is promote an involvement of civil society organization in electoral matters. And the fifth is consideration of an early voting system for advanced voting as opposed to the proxy voting system. Further, that the advanced voting to be extended to other categories of voters in line with the international best practices, such as elderly, sick, and infirm. The sixth, the need to review and delineate the roles of the Electoral Commissioner's office and that of the Electoral Supervisor. And seventh, that the Electoral Commission of Mauritius should consider introducing a proof of registration mechanism, as in cases where people who indicated that they registered, there was no mechanism to prove whether they did or not. I think that's the purpose of this recommendation. And the need to review the lead time between disbanding of parliament and the election date. All parties must have sufficient lead time as candidates and as citizens, as well as the electoral management body. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, notwithstanding the limitations identified earlier on, the ECF SADC mission commends the Electoral Commission of Mauritius for substantially discharging its mandate in accordance with the revised SADC principles and guidelines for governing democratic elections in the SADC region. The mission congratulates the people of the Republic of Mauritius on the exemplary manner in which they conducted themselves during the electoral period observed. And finally, as I conclude, on behalf of the ECF SADC Observer Mission, I wish to encourage the people of the Republic of Mauritius to remain tolerant, peaceful, and accept the outcomes of the electoral results.
Permettez-moi tout d'abord de prendre la parole de la mission d'information de l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie, de rappeler que cette Organisation internationale de la francophonie a 88 États membres. C'est une organisation intergouvernementale étalée sur les 4 continents. 32 pays africains sont membres de l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie. C'est juste pour vous donner cette information, 32 États africains, membres de l'Union africaine, sont membres de l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie. Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, avant de donner lecture au communiqué de la mission d'information et de contact des élections législatives à Maurice le 7 novembre, permettez-moi de rendre un vibrant hommage à son Excellence le ministre des Affaires étrangères et du Commerce international de Zimbabwe, l'honorable Sibusiso Moyo, pour son engagement personnel, pour son leadership et pour le leadership de la SADC dans la supervision de l'observation des élections de cette année. Ainsi, de rendre aussi hommage au leadership de Dr. Spiususa Wandera Kazibouyi, l'ancien vice-président de la République de l'Ouganda, pour sa mobilisation et pour son engagement personnel. Bien sûr, sans oublier son Excellence M. Glyn Machinini, le chef de la mission du Forum des commissions électorales. C'est très très important de voir l'engagement de l'Union africaine, de la SADC, l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie, du Forum des commissions électorales de la SADC pour la promotion des valeurs de la démocratie, des valeurs des droits de l'homme. Et l'avenir de notre continent ne pourra être que démocratique dans notre combat général pour démocratiser l'espace africain et le futur. Mesdames, Messieurs, permettez-moi de donner lecture au communiqué de presse de notre mission d'information électorale. À la demande du commissaire électoral de Maurice, M. Efran Abdrahman, la secrétaire générale de la francophonie, Son Excellence Madame Louise Mushikiwabo a décidé de l'envoi d'une mission d'information et de contact à l'occasion des élections législatives qui se sont déroulées le 7 novembre 2019 à l'île Maurice. Cette mission, conduite par votre serviteur, conduite par moi-même, M. Mohamed Aouchar, ancien ministre de la Justice du Royaume du Maroc, était composée de hauts fonctionnaires de l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie, de parlementaires, de juristes, d'experts électoraux de haut niveau. Durant son séjour à Maurice, la mission a eu des entretiens avec les autorités nationales, le bureau de commissaire électoral, le président de la Cour suprême, les partis politiques et certaines organisations de la société civile. Il a également mené des concertations avec les missions internationales d'observation électorale de la SADC, de l'Union africaine et du Forum des commissions électorales des États membres de la SADC. La mission de la francophonie a œuvré conformément aux principes directeurs de la francophonie en matière électorale et aux engagements consignés dans la déclaration de Bamako. La mission salue l'organisation des élections qui se sont déroulées dans le calme et la sérénité. Il note le caractère transparent, fiable et crédible du processus électoral à Maurice, ainsi que la confiance entre les acteurs politiques et institutionnels. La mission d'information et de contact salue également le professionnalisme, la disponibilité et l'engagement dont ont fait preuve le bureau de commissaire électoral et les agents électoraux qui ont assuré la conduite de ces élections. Le jour du scrutin, les membres de la mission de la francophonie se sont déployés sur les 20 circonscriptions de l'île Maurice pour observer les opérations de vote et de dépouillement. Sur la base des échanges qu'elle a eus et des constats relevés, la mission de l'OIF note avec satisfaction. Premièrement, une atmosphère apaisée et de sécurité. Le taux élevé de la participation. La disponibilité de matériel électoral dans les centres de vote. Une maîtrise des règles et procédures par les membres des centres de vote. La forte représentation des femmes et des jeunes parmi les agents électoraux. La présence de délégués des candidats dans tous les bureaux de vote. L'affichage systématique des listes devant les bureaux de vote. La fluidité et la transparence de déroulement des opérations de vote. La présence discrète des forces de sécurité dans les lieux de vote. La transparence des opérations de dépouillement. La délégation de la francophonie remercie les autorités, la population mauricienne de l'accueil qui lui a été réservé. Les constats relevés et les recommandations feront l'objet d'un rapport destiné à la secrétaire générale de la francophonie. Ces renforcements viseront à renforcer le dispositif légal et organisationnel du système électoral. Ils viseront aussi et également à souligner les bonnes pratiques de processus électoral dans ce pays qui seront utiles aux échanges d'expériences ainsi qu'à l'enracinement de la démocratie et de l'état de droit dans l'espace francophone. Je vous remercie.